Montana, 1887. Some people arrive in a town looking like they already belong there. Grace Whitfield was not one of them. She sat on a wooden bench outside the Millbrook General Store on a Thursday afternoon in September, with a single cardboard suitcase beside her and the expression of someone who has already done the math on everything she's lost a dough and still isn't ready to say the total out loud. Her hair was pinned in a simple knot that was already coming undone. Her dress, grey cotton, was the kind of thing a woman wears when she spent 3 straight days on a train at Bacho, and it had seen better days, better weeks, maybe even a better life. She had come from Kansas, following her husband, who'd been hired to work at a sawmill in Montana, a job that promised more money and a home of their own after so many years of renting rooms. He'd gone ahead 3 months earlier to get settled and send for her once everything was ready. The letter arrived in August. It wasn't from him. It was from the sawmill foreman, an accident with a log that rolled before its time. He died instantly without suffering. The letter said, "Oh." The way those letters always say it, as if that were supposed to ease something. Grace sold what little she had, took what money remained, and boarded the train anyway, because there was nowhere left to go back to. The house in Kansas hadn't been hers for months. Her parents had died years before. No brothers, no sisters, no cousins, no one, anywhere in the world, waiting on a letter from her. So there she sat, on that bench outside the Millbrook store, Montana, with $11.60, and an entire life that had vanished in 3 months. That was when a girl, maybe 7 years old, stopped right in front of her, ow, with the wide, direct eyes of a child who hasn't yet learned that staring is impolite. Ow, and said, "Are you waiting for someone, Mom?" And before Grace could answer, a man's voice called out, "Emily." Grace looked up. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with a few days' worth of stubble and a flannel shirt that had seen too much work for one day. He had a sack of flour over one shoulder and a crumpled list in his other hand, and he shot the girl a look that seemed well-practiced, like he'd used it 100 times before. "Emily," he said it again, "don't go up to people like that." "She looks sad, Papa," the girl said, without moving an inch. "That might be true," the man said, "but it's not our business." "It could be," Emily answered, with the plain simplicity of someone who hasn't yet learned there's a difference between what should be your business and what actually is. Grace looked at the two of them. There was no one else with them, no wife, no mother in sight, just the man and the girl, standing there in the middle of the dusty street. "I'm fine," Grace said. It wasn't true, but it was the easiest answer there was. The man studied her a moment longer than manners called for. It wasn't idle curiosity. It was the look of someone used to reading the weather before a storm, seeing what was actually there, not just what he'd hoped to find. "Nathaniel Cole," he said finally, shifting the flour sack to his other shoulder and holding out his free hand. "This is Emily." "Grace Whitfield," she answered, shaking his hand. "You're not from here," Nathaniel said. "Kansas," Grace said. "I came out after my husband. He worked at the sawmill." Something shifted in the man's face. Not quite pity, something quieter than that. The recognition of someone who has also lost something that wasn't supposed to end up missing. "Mr. Whitfield?" he asked, low, already knowing the answer before he'd even finished the question. Grace looked out at the street. "He died in an accident 3 weeks ago," she said. "The letter came after I'd already bought the ticket." Emily stopped rocking on her heels. She went completely still, watching Grace with an attention that seemed too large for her 7 years. "I'm sorry," Nathaniel said, and he meant it. You could hear the weight of it in his voice. The difference between condolences from someone who has actually lost something and condolences that are only polite, offered by someone who's never had to learn that particular grief. "Are you staying somewhere?" he asked. Grace glanced at the boarding house across the street, then back at him. "I'm working on it," she said. She had $11.60. The boarding house charged $1.50 a night. That gave her 7 nights a row, maybe 8, if she ate light a row, to find some kind of work in a town where no one knew her and where no one was waiting for her. It wasn't impossible, but it was close enough to impossible that the difference felt like a technicality. She didn't tell Nathaniel Cole any of that. She spent the afternoon doing what she could. The general store didn't need help. The boarding house already had a cook, and had for years. The school had a teacher hired since the start of the year. The only possibility was the town seamstress, a woman named Alma, who said she might need help in 2 weeks akabo, not this week akao, and looked at Grace's hands with the same silent appraisal of someone weighing the difference between a woman who has truly sewn before and a woman who only says she can. Grace knew how to sew. She knew how to cook, wash, mend, keep the books for an entire household on her own. She had been taking care of her own life, and anyone else's who needed it, since she was 15, when her mother took sick and never got out of bed again. She had learned to carry everything without anyone ever asking whether she wanted to be the one carrying it. She was back in her room at the boarding house, running the numbers again, this time under her breath, as if saying them out loud might make them easier to bear, when someone knocked at the door. She opened it. Emily stood in the hallway, holding a covered plate. "Papa made stew," the girl said. "He figured you probably hadn't eaten." Behind her, down the hall, standing at a careful distance that made it plain he'd sent his daughter ahead rather than knock himself, Nathaniel Cole was staring at the wall as though it were the most fascinating thing in the world. "He didn't have to do that," Grace said. "I know," Emily answered simply. "Papa does things he doesn't have to do. Aunt Ruth says it's because Mama isn't here anymore, and he doesn't know what to do with all the caring he's got left over." She said it with the absolute seriousness of a 7-year-old who considers this piece of information extremely important. Down the hall, Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment, the way someone does when they're caught off guard by their own words, coming out of someone else's mouth. Grace took the plate, and I have to say, "Eow," that line of Emily's went straight through my chest. A 7-year-old shouldn't have to carry that kind of understanding about her own father's grief. But she did. And she handed it to a stranger at a boarding house door like it was the most natural thing in the world. If a child has ever told you the truest thing you heard all day without even meaning to, drop a comment and tell me about it. Because this story still has a few more of those small truths, said at exactly the right moment. Grace stayed a second night, and a third because Alma had mentioned she might be able to start her on sewing work the following Thursday. That meant Grace needed to stay in Millbrook until then, which required money she simply didn't have enough of. When she came down the stairs on Wednesday morning, and the innkeeper told her that 4 more nights had already been paid for, she went straight to the sawmill, where she was told she'd find Nathaniel Cole. "You didn't need to do that," she said. "I know," he answered. He was hauling logs and didn't stop working to say it. "I'll pay you back," Grace said. "You don't have to," he said. "I'm going to anyway," she insisted. He stopped hauling, looked straight at her not measuring, not appraising this time, just looking. "All right," he said. "You pay me back." It wasn't surrender. It was the recognition of a man who understood perfectly the difference between accepting help and accepting charity, and who respected that difference too much to turn it into a problem. She started her sewing work that Thursday, as arranged. It was fine, tiring work, but she was good at it, and Alma told her Saturday that she could come back the following week. It wasn't a solution, but it was a direction, and that was already more than Grace had had in weeks. Nathaniel passed by the seamstress's shop Saturday afternoon, with Emily beside him. He said he was just passing through, though the sewing shop wasn't on the way to anywhere he'd mentioned needing to go. While her father talked with Alma, Emily told Grace she'd asked at breakfast whether the lady from Kansas was going to stay in Millbrook. "And what did your father say?" Grace asked. Emily thought about that carefully. "He said he didn't know," she answered. "But he said it the way you say things when you're hoping someone proves you wrong." She turned back to look at the street with the calm of a child who has already delivered the message she needed to deliver and considers the job done. Emily really talked to her for the first time on a Sunday. Nathaniel had taken his daughter to church. Grace had gone alone and found the two of them sitting 2 rows ahead, a macro. and afterward, Nathaniel introduced her to the pastor and to several people in town with the ease of a man who had already made up his mind about something without announcing it to anyone, not even to himself. They walked back down the main street together, the three of them, the way it happens when nobody planned anything and everybody just went along with it. Emily walked beside Grace. She stayed quiet for a while. Then, "Do you know how to braid?" "Hair?" Grace asked. "Yes," Emily said. "Papa tries. He practices on the horse's tail, but it's not the same." Grace glanced at Nathaniel, walking a little ahead, who either hadn't heard that or was pretending not to have heard it with impressive commitment. "I could teach you," Grace said. "Yes," Emily answered, with the quiet authority of a 7-year-old who knows exactly what she wants. That afternoon, Grace sat on the boarding house porch and braided Emily's hair while the girl talked non-stop about her pet chicken, about her teacher, about a dog a neighbor had promised her once the next litter came. Nathaniel sat in the third chair and said almost nothing, which Grace had already learned wasn't absence in him. It was attention. He was listening to every word. When it was time to go, Emily held onto Grace's hand for a moment before letting go. Nathaniel looked at his daughter's braid, then at Grace. He didn't say anything. But on the walk back to the wagon, Emily said out loud, "Papa, can she come to dinner sometime?" "Emily." Nathaniel used the voice parents use when a child says the truth at exactly the wrong moment. And Grace looked at the mountains behind the town and said nothing, "Mao." But she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, the sense that she might, without meaning to, be exactly where she was supposed to be. I want to pause here for a moment. This story has already reached places I never imagined it would. Listeners from Brazil, from Portugal, from Nigeria, from the Philippines, from Mexico, countries I couldn't have pointed to on a map when I first started telling stories like this one. Every one of you found something in these characters worth staying for, all the way to the end, and that means more than I can really put into words. If this story is keeping you company right now, a comment telling me where you're watching from, and a like mean more than I know how to say. The invitation came from Emily, not officially afar. She'd already been warned after the Sunday walk that she couldn't invite Grace to dinner without asking her father first. Technically, she followed the rule. She asked Monday morning, and Nathaniel answered, "We'll see," which Emily interpreted quite conveniently as a definite yes. Grace arrived at the Cole farm Wednesday evening and found the table set for 3, and Emily arranging wildflowers in a mason jar with the concentration of someone carrying out a carefully considered plan. "Papa said you were coming," Emily said. "He told me the same thing," Grace answered from the kitchen doorway. "Sorry about that." "You don't have to be sorry," she said, and she meant it. The farmhouse had been built by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Solid, well kept, everything in its place. It was also the kind of house that had been run for 2 years by one man alone, which meant it worked fine, but felt a little too quiet, the way places do when they've forgotten what it feels like to be cared for beyond the bare necessities. Dinner was good. Nathaniel cooked without any fuss, competently, without making the slightest effort to draw attention to it. Emily talked the entire time. Nathaniel said that the right things tend to happen at the right time, and Grace held on to that line without quite knowing why. After dinner, Emily was sent to bed with a firmness that suggested her father had something to say. He sat down at the kitchen table across from Grace with his coffee. "I want to ask you something directly," he said, "because I don't know how to do it any other way." She waited. "How long have you been here? Do you mean to stay in Millbrook?" Grace looked down at her cup. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I don't have anywhere else to go." He nodded slowly, taking that in. "That's not a bad answer," he said, which wasn't what she'd expected to hear. "Why?" she asked. He looked at his coffee. "Because I have a question I'm not ready to ask yet," he said, "and I need you to still be here when I am." He invited her out to the farm the following Saturday, not for dinner. He was specific. There was something he wanted to show her. He said it with the look of a man who'd rehearsed the line several times and still wasn't sure it would survive the moment it actually mattered. She went Saturday. He showed her the whole farm, awa. The pasture, the fences, the barn, the garden overrun with weeds because he could never spare the time to tend it, the cattle always coming first. He showed her the apple tree on the east side, the one his wife had planted their first year there. He showed her all of it without explaining any of it, as if the showing itself was the whole explanation. Afterward, they sat on the porch. Emily was visible out in the yard, absorbed in some project involving a length of rope that she seemed to be taking very seriously. Nathaniel turned his coffee cup in his hands. "I'm going to say something," he said, "and I want you to know you can say no, and things will still be fine between us." She waited. "I need help with this farm," he said. "Not just the practical things, though those matter too. I need someone who knows how to make a house feel like a home again. Someone Emily will listen to." He looked out at the mountains. "I need someone who could really stay here, permanently." She went very still. "I'm not talking about hiring help," he said. "I'm talking about something else, something real." He looked straight at her. "I'm talking about us being a family." The Montana afternoon surrounded them on every side. "I know you don't know me well enough yet to answer that now," he said. "I'm not asking for an answer today. I just wanted to tell you what I've been thinking, because you've been honest with me since day one, and it felt right to be honest back." She looked at that careful, direct, thoroughly decent man, Ew, who had sent his daughter to deliver stew to a boarding house door and quietly paid off her bill without telling her, and who was now showing her an abandoned garden like it was some kind of confession. "Nathaniel," she said, "I need to think about it." "That's all I'm asking," he said, and he meant it. The complication arrived Monday morning. His name was Silas Whitcomb, 43 years old, owner of the mill on the east side of Millbrook, widowed just over a year, and he made no effort to hide it. He turned up at the seamstress's shop while Grace was working, with the easy confidence of a man who's heard from enough people that he's a good match and started believing it without ever checking. He was pleasant. He was successful. He asked if she'd like to come to the harvest dance on Saturday, with the polished charm of someone well practiced at that kind of invitation. She thanked him and said she'd think about it. Alma, who was ironing clothes a few feet away, didn't say a word until he'd gone out the door. "Silas Whitcomb," she said then. "Yes," Grace answered. "Good man," Alma said. "Solid, well respected. His late wife was a friend of mine." She paused. "He'd take good care of you." Grace kept working. "The whole town thinks Nathaniel Cole has gotten too set in his ways to marry again," Alma said, with the bluntness of a woman who considers beating around the bush a waste of time. "They think he'll just keep running that farm alone until the children are grown." She glanced at Grace over the clothes. "I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying that's what people think." Grace thought about it all afternoon. Thought about Silas Whitcomb, who was solid, pleasant, and would take care of her. Thought about what it meant to be taken care of by someone chosen for being solid and pleasant, rather than someone chosen for something more specific. An abandoned garden shown to her like a confession, a coffee cup turning in careful hands, a little girl who brought stew to a boarding house door and then asked to learn how to braid her own hair. She thought about what she'd told herself in her boarding house room that first week, that she was afraid of wanting something too much, of saying yes to the wrong option simply because it was available. Silas Whitcomb was available. He was the safe version of the question. And she understood, standing in front of the seamstress's shop, Tuesday light coming through the window, that safe and right aren't always the same word. She had made that mistake before, on a smaller scale, and she had no intention of making it again. It took her another week to think through Nathaniel's proposal. Not the practical part, au bavro. The practical part had been clear from day one. On one side, a boarding house room, $11 shrinking a little more each day, a new town where no one was waiting for her. On the other, a farm, a home, a girl who had already made up her mind about everything, and a man pointing the way for her through a dead garden. The real question was whether she was saying yes to Nathaniel Cole, or just saying yes to not being alone anymore. And she wasn't sure deep down that it made any difference. She had been alone for too long already, not always in body or war, but alone the way you are when you're always holding things up for someone else and never the one being held up by anyone. She was afraid that the sheer wanting of not being alone would make her accept something that wasn't quite right and then tell herself afterward that it was enough. On Thursday, she went out to the farm to return a book Emily had lent her. She found the girl on the porch trying to mend a scrap of fabric with far more concentration than her skill really allowed for. Emily looked up. "Are you going to stay?" she asked. "I'm thinking about it," Grace answered. "Papa thinks you're going to stay," Emily said. "He said he's different when you're here." "Different how?" Grace asked. Emily considered that with the seriousness she gave most things. "Less like he's carrying everything alone," she said, and went back to her sewing. Grace sat down on the porch step and looked at the mountains, understanding ow, with the strange calm that comes when a child tells the truth without even knowing she's doing it. That the question she'd been carrying around all week was the wrong question. The right one was simpler. Did she want to hold things up alongside someone instead of alone? The answer had been yes, for a long time. She'd just been afraid to say it out loud, because saying it out loud makes a thing real, and real things can be lost. She found Nathaniel at the north fence Friday morning. She hadn't planned to look for him there. She'd meant to go to the seamstress's shop, but she'd already walked 3 blocks, stopped and turned back, because suddenly she had her answer, and putting off that conversation for one more day felt like a waste that neither of them needed. He saw her crossing the field, stopped working, and waited with the patience of a man who decided not to assume anything. She stopped a few steps from the fence. "I've been thinking about what you said," she said. "I know," he answered. "I want to say yes," she said, "but I need to say something first." He waited. "I'm not doing this because I have nowhere else to go," she said. "I have the sewing. I got another offer this week from a man the whole town thinks is a sensible choice." She looked straight at him. "I'm saying yes because Emily spent 40 minutes telling me about a chicken, because she asked me to braid her hair, because you showed me a dead garden like it was the most important thing on the property." She paused. "I'm saying yes because of you, not because of the alternative." He looked at her for a long moment. "Then I need to tell you something too," he said. She waited. "When I saw you on that bench outside the store," he said, "Emily asked why you looked sad, and I told her it wasn't our business. And I walked off believing that." He looked at the fence. "I got to the end of the street and stopped, because I couldn't stop thinking about the day I met her mother, and how I'd almost said nothing that day too, and how different everything would have been if I'd let it pass." He looked back up at Grace. "So I turned around and came back. And by the time I got close, Emily had already started talking to you." Something close to a smile crossed his face. "She's been trying to give me a second chance ever since," he said. She looked at that man, fence post in hand, temples already marked by the sun, and at his daughter, who brought stew to strangers at a boarding house door. "Yes," she said simply, "completely. They married in November at the Millbrook church." Emily was the happiest person there and made no effort to hide it, telling everyone who came near that she finally had a real mother, Aharo, exactly like she'd asked for, every night in her prayers. Nathaniel stood at the altar, watching Grace walk toward him, and thought about a Thursday afternoon, and a woman sitting on a wooden bench, and a daughter who'd asked the wrong question at exactly the right time. The real work started right after winter. There was the whole farm to learn fences, the cattle's habits, which pastures held up through summer drought and which didn't. There were also the rhythms of a child, the unspoken rules of a household that had built its own grammar over 2 years without a mother in it. Emily taught Grace, without ever needing to say a single word, exactly where her mother used to stand in the kitchen, and what that spot meant. Grace learned. She'd always been good at learning. She'd been learning to carry things alone since she was 15, and the difference now was that someone was carrying them with her. The garden was her first project. The fall planting was done with care, preparing the ground for the winter varieties and for what would grow back the following spring. Nathaniel came out of the house one evening and stood watching. My first wife planted the apple tree, he said. It was the first thing she did when we got here. I know, Grace said. You told me. She ought to be remembered, he said. By the children, by you too. Then let's make sure she is, Grace said. We'll tell her stories. We'll take care of the tree. Something settled in him in that moment, something that hadn't settled in 2 years. In May, Emily sat under the apple tree while it bloomed, looking at the blossoms with the expression of a child seeing, for the first time, something she'd always been told about. Mama planted this, she told Grace. The first year they were here. I know, Grace said. You told me. That night on the porch, the three of them, chairs filled, the Montana mountains doing exactly what they always did. Nathaniel looked at his daughter, then at Grace, whose hair had started slipping loose from its knot, the way it always did by evening, reading her book in the chair beside him. He was completely at peace. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She looked up, met his eyes for a moment, and went back to her book. The night settled around all of them, and for the first time in 2 years, that moment felt like enough. Grace Whitfield arrived in Millbrook, Montana, with a cardboard suitcase, $11.60, and no one left in the whole world waiting for her. She sat on a wooden bench, doing the math on a life that had run out of numbers, and a 7-year-old girl stopped in front of her and asked if she was waiting for someone. I think about Emily a lot, Juraz, about what it means not to be afraid to ask a direct question. Over time, adults learn to walk past people sitting on benches without getting involved. We learn not to pry. We learn the 100 small ways of pretending we didn't see. Emily hadn't learned any of that yet. She stopped. She asked. And her father, who'd been carrying everything alone for 2 years, turned around at the end of the street and came back. Don't walk past the person on the bench. Ask the question. Turn around at the end of the street. And there's one more thing I want to say about Grace about the moment she stood in front of the seamstress's shop on a Tuesday afternoon and understood that safe and right aren't always the same word. It's a hard thing to learn. A lot of people never learn it or learn it too late. She learned it at 26, in a town where she had nothing and had to make the hardest choice of her life. That cost her something. The right choices almost always do. Thank you for walking with me this far today. Wherever you are, I mean that owl. Thank you for staying until the end. Until the next story, owl, and keep writing your own.